Welcome to my block. It's not much, but it's home. And I don't know if you're anything like me, but over the last couple of weeks and months, we've gotten to know our neighbors a whole lot better. Our neighbors on one side of us just got engaged, and our neighbors on the other side just had a baby. We've had sit downs in our backyard around fire pits where we'll sit in our fire pit in our backyard and our neighbors sit by their fire pit in their backyard, and we'll have like a backyard social distance bonfire. But this isn't the only place I've ever called home. I was born in Northern California, like 2 blocks from the place where Snoopy and the rest of the Peanuts gang were born and created. And I had a block that I called home there. There was Bob and Myrtle right across the street. Bob, they were older than my grandparents, but Bob had basically traced his family tree all the way back to the settlers. And next to them was Dave, and he taught me to love magic tricks. Then a couple days right before I started middle school, we moved to a suburb just south of Nashville, Tennessee, which was totally different. I didn't know anybody there. Everyone spoke with a little more twang and drove some nicer cars, but it didn't take long before that became home too. And some of my dearest friends today are friends I had in middle school and high school in Brentwood. Fast forward a few more years and I moved to the mountains of South Carolina to go to college at FU, Furman University. And again, I didn't really know anybody who went there. But before long, when I was going back to my dorm, I was saying, hey, I'll meet you back at home. Not the home where my parents lived, but the home where I lived, because those people became my neighbors and that became home. Well, about a year after I graduated from Furman, I moved to Fort Worth, Texas. And no, I didn't become a cowboy. I didn't buy cowboy boots and a giant hat and a big old belt buckle. But I met people who I love. I learned to appreciate Tex-Mex and appreciate that everything is bigger because, Texas. And then 4 years ago, I moved here to St. Louis. Again, I didn't really know anybody, but I came here to work at The Gathering. And 2 years ago, we moved on to this block, and here I've gotten married. I've bought a house, and I've built roots. St. Louis has become home. This is my home. I think home matters to God. It mattered to the people of God in the Old Testament. And after all, they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years in the desert before they arrived in the land that God had promised them. They called it the Promised Land. And it became their home. It became the place where they settled. The place mattered to the people of God. And then a few centuries later, these invaders from this place called Babylon showed up. And they came in and they conquered Israel. And they took about half of these Israelites and brought them back to Babylon. They were exiles. They were living in a place where they didn't know the language, where they had been torn from their families and torn from their neighbors and their relationships. They didn't have temples to worship in. Everything was different. They were a conquered people and they were taken from their home. And they cried out. And the story goes that God heard them. And God made a promise with these Israelites that this was going to end. And they had a future full of hope. But before that, God had one request for the Israelites: to bless the cities in Babylon where they found themselves. Now that sounds kind of weird, but God wanted them to leave the cities where they were exiles better than they found them. Now that might sound really weird. Like, why would God ask the Israelites to help build up the cities of the people who had conquered them? Well, I think it's about a garden. You see, when the Bible starts, it's set in a garden. And God creates everything in it, animals, plants, and He creates 2 people. And He tells these 2 people that He wants them to be partners in the garden. God wants them to take care of the plants and the animals, to tend the flowers and the fields. God might have made everything in the garden, But God also wanted the people to be his helpers. God created us to be partners in making the world the way that God wants it to be. We are God's partners, you and I. So we go back to Babylon, and God says to the people, promote the welfare of the city where I have sent you. Pray to the Lord for it. It may not have been a garden, but it was where God had planted them. And God had a work for them in that garden, in that town, in the same way that God had work for Adam and Eve in the original garden. Someone once told me the best measure of a person is how well they impact the ecosystem around them. We're all part of environments and food chains. We're all part of interconnected relationships. And the question that we get to ask is, are those ecosystems, are those environments better because we are in them? Just like Adam and Eve in the garden, is the garden around you, is your neighborhood around you better? Are the people around you, are their lives better because you are in them? Before we can go bless the world, love the world, and serve the whole world, sometimes we have to start by just living the mission of showing love to the people right around us here at home.